Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. Any tips for increasing bench press? I am a natty with disproportionately weak pressing muscles. Well, that's hours and hours to answer. I mean, we could cover the most basic stuff. Number one, do you know how to bench? Right? Are you weak on the bench because your technique is terrible? The bench press is the most technique-oriented of any of the basic barbell lifts by a long shot. Are you tight? Are you squeezing the bar tightly? Do you have your lats engaged? Do you have your scapula retracted or your feet dug in? Right, those are big parts of it. The other thing that we would address is hypertrophy end. Now, if you're a novice, you need to just follow a novice program and you need to bulk. But if you're not, well, you're going to have to figure out where your weak links are on the bench, and you're going to have to hypertrophy them. And easier said than done, because what are our possible weak links? Pecs, anterior deltoids, triceps, those are your big ones. What about upper back? What about lats, right? All potential weak links. Are you hypertrophying the weakest link? Are you putting active work into it? Are you eating enough to grow? I mean, that's the other thing that it comes down to also. Pressing, and particularly the bench press, is most correlated with body weight out of, again, any of the big lifts. You can eat your way to a bigger bench, but here's the thing. If you're a drug-free lifter and you are not bulking, and keep in mind the normal definition of bulking, not the idiot definition, bulking means gaining weight. In other words, if you're 170 pounds and you're staying at 170 pounds for 6 months straight, instead of getting to 175, you know why your bench isn't going up. You are not eating enough for your bench to go up. You're not gaining muscle. Because we can talk about the hypertrophy training, but are you recovering from it? Is it hard enough? Is it stimulating enough? And are you able to recover from it because you're eating enough food, sleeping enough, so on? That's really what it comes down to. Those are the real issues we're dealing with. I mean, summing it up, most people who are not getting their bench up, it's because, number one, technically they don't know how to bench correctly. Number two, they are not doing everything that they need to do to bring up the weak links and hypertrophy them. That includes the training end, that includes the nutrition end, right? Because you can't stand there and guys will say, well, I want to get leaner right now, but you're not on gear, okay? Or if you already have a really big bench and you're even on gear, you kind of fall back in the same category, right? You already bench 400 pounds and you're on gear. Well, best of luck with that goal. You need to pick a goal. Are you trying to get leaner? Or are you trying to increase your bench? You're going to have to pick one and do them in phases. Just food for thought. Simplest way to address this question. All right, next question. You said glute activation doesn't matter. Actually, I never said that. And basically useless. What would you suggest to do for low back pain on the sides? I thought that's because weak underactive gluteus-medius. Okay. Weak versus underactive are not the same thing. You can have weak glutes, but when people say, oh, we have to activate the glutes, all right, that is 100% chance that is a con man bullshit artist, right? Doing glute activation movements. Oh, let's put a hip circle around our knees. That doesn't do anything to recruit more glute, by the way. Zero, nothing. It biomechanically cannot in any delusional world you live in. I don't care how delusional of a world you live in. You're more likely to get a unicorn or a dragon to ride than you are for that hip band to increase glute activation. So even if you live in a delusional world, there's levels of delusion, right? There's levels of delusion. Getting a dragon is still less delusional than that hip band causing your glutes to recruit harder. Just using that as an example. It's more realistic. At least that happens in fantasy stories and in Game of Thrones. So you've at least seen it somewhere. You've never seen a glute, one of those little hip circles or whatever cause more glute activation. You don't need glute activation exercises. I'm not saying glute activation doesn't matter. You have to activate the glutes for them to grow. But deep squats, box squats, all cause more glute hypertrophy than all this other nonsense. Now, a muscle is weak. You could be having some low back pain due to weak glutes. You can have low back pain due to weak hamstrings. Ooh. You have low back pain due to weak abdominals. Or you could have it due to a weak low back. Any one of those things can be causing it. But putting a booty band around your hips is not going to fix it. You need to build those muscles up. Right? You need to build those muscles up. And low back pain is not indicative of pathologies anyways. So I'm not saying you don't need to build your glutes. I'm saying all this silly nonsense doesn't do anything. And if you're having things like low back pain, you need to figure out what weak muscle is causing it. Something is weak, it's contributing, almost guaranteed. But it could be any one of those muscles. Figure out which one is weak and train it more. Or better yet, train all of them more. In no world ever has there ever been a downside to getting your low back, your glutes, your hamstrings, or your abdominals stronger. There are no downsides to doing this. So maybe just work on all four of them more. If you can't figure out which one is your issue. Right? Problem solved. All right, next question and last question of the week. Are deadlift variations, such as Jefferson between the legs, behind the back deadlifts, acceptable if used only as a max effort variation for someone with a straight bar only? Now that's a reasonable question. Because yeah, I would argue these exercises are not ideal to train with. But what are we doing with max effort work? Our goal is to strain maximally against a heavy load and to rotate the movement so that we don't get overuse. Are these acceptable? Sure. You could work them into your rotation. I generally wouldn't because I can come up with other stuff. But, you know, if you need more variations, especially if you're maxing on 2 lower body lifts, and let's say you're exhausting your stuff, your sumo, your conventional deficits, block pulls, you don't have a way to hook up bands, you need to get some chains. I will be honest with you. If you're at a point where you're looking at these sort of lifts, you need to get some chains and put them over the bar. They're not that expensive or hard to get. I don't care what country you live in. If you can afford a barbell, I promise you can afford 100 pounds of chains. 100 pounds of chains probably cost less than your barbell did, unless you got a really cheap bar. Okay? You do snatch grip deadlifts. Sure, you could use some of these as variations, right? For max effort only. I wouldn't do rep work on them. I wouldn't train them. I wouldn't do speed work with them. But for max effort, sure. You know why? Because any big lift works. Any lift that you can safely max on is an acceptable max effort lift. I generally tell people to try to avoid upper body only pulls though, because we have we have deadlifts for pulling. Right, so I generally stick with some sort of squat, some sort of press, and then some sort of full body pull. So that kind of throws out pull-ups and chin-ups. But, you know, on rare occasion, I don't even think those are that bad. Right, they're viable max effort lifts. Just wouldn't do them that often because there's not that many muscles involved. Right, we get all the back muscles involved on the other pulls off the floor and stuff. But keep in mind, changing range of motion is viable. But sure, you could do these. You could do them if you needed to for max effort work. But just don't assume that they carry over. They're going to carry over less to your other deadlifts. They still carry over because maxing itself is a skill. There's some carryover. It's just going to be less carryover. Right? But look, if you just need random stuff to do and you're very advanced, right? You're a very advanced lifter. Right? You've already exhausted 6, 7, 8 different pulls. Can't come up with more stuff? Sure, throw them in, not a problem. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.